Hello, class. So today we will be talking about genetic traits, but first we will be talking about the terms that were assigned to you last night. The terms were heredity, Gregor Mendel, allele, genes, dominant, recessive, homozygous, heterozygous, genotype, and phenotype. First, we'll be talking about inheritance. The definition of inheritance is the development of genes or alleles from parents. There's two categories of inheritance called genes or alleles. The development from parents is called inheritance. Genes is obviously a unit of inheritance, and it's a characteristics that comes from a parent or previous generations. Genes are a unit of inheritance that are characteristics. Alleles are a unit of inheritance as well. There are two units of inheritance, alleles and genes. That is very important. Alleles can be found on the chromosomes. These can also have genetic mutations in it. Alleles are a unit of inheritance that are found on chromosomes. Heredity, it comes from parents or previous generations. So you inherit things that come from your parents or previous generations. Okay, so we're going to recap that whole inheritance area. There's four words that you need to know: genes, alleles, heredity, and inheritance. Genes are the unit of inheritance. Alleles are a unit of inheritance. Inheritance is coming from your parents or other generations. It's also used as heredity, but heredity does not have units. Next, we're moving on to the father of genetics. The father of genetics is Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel was the father of genetics. He looked at many things, but he did most of his research in pea plants. He noticed genotypes and phenotypes in plants. Phenotypes are physical characteristics of a creature, meaning your hair color could be brown. So that would be a phenotype. Or a cow having white hair with black spots, also a phenotype. So a phenotype would be a physical characteristic. And who found that? Gregor Mendel. A phenotype is a genetic characteristic, such as male or female, or XX or XY chromosomes. So the Betsy, the cow, has XX chromosomes, meaning that is a genotype of her characteristics. So, to recap that area, the father of genetics is Gregor Mendel, who looked at pea plants and he noticed genotypes and phenotypes in pea plants. Phenotypes are physical characteristics, aka hair color. Genotypes are genetic characteristics, such as XX or XY. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about genes. Genes, there's two different types, once again, dominant and recessive. Dominant traits are most common and recessive traits are not common. Dominant traits are also known as XX. Oh, sorry about that. Dominant traits are known as X, oftentimes. Recessive traits are also known as Y, oftentimes. Because dominant is what? And recessive is what? Dominant is common, recessive is not. You most of the time see these traits in Punnett squares. A Punnett square is what looks like a window because it has 4 sections. For future reference, these 4 sections would be labeled in the top left box 1, then 2 in the top right box. The bottom left is 3, and the bottom right is 4. So top box on the left is known as what number? 1. And the top right box is known as 2. The bottom left, 3. And finally, the bottom right, 4. So when doing a Punnett square, you list your gene types on the side in each quadrant. So, for example, and they're also laid out across the top. For example, if I gave you an example of a box, it would have X and X on the left side and X and X across the top, meaning all the boxes on the inside would say XX in box 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the ratio for that would be 4 to 4. So well, yeah. So it's 100% that the ratio would be non-existent since it's 100% gonna happen. Here we get into heterozygous and homozygous. Heterozygous is when the genes are different, such as XY. Homozygous is when the genes are the same, XX. So XY is an example of heterozygous. XX is an example of homozygous. Okay. So there's a few questions now for practicing. What type of gene is XX? What type of gene is XX? What type of gene is XY? What type of gene is XY? If one cow has blue eyes, XX, and cow 2 has brown eyes, XY, what are the chances the baby has green eyes, YY? If cow 1 has blue eyes, XX, cow 2 has brown eyes, XY, what are the chances it has green eyes, YY? Who was the father of genetics? Who was the father of genetics? What is an example of a phenotype? And what is an example of a genotype? What is an example of a phenotype? What is an example of a genotype? Okay, now you can pause to answer those. Alrighty, the answer to question 1, what is the gene? What type of gene is XX, which would be homozygous because they are the same. X and X are the same gene. What is the example? What type of gene is XY? That would be heterozygous because they're different. If cow 1 has blue eyes and cow 2 has brown eyes, what are the chances that it has green eyes? YY? 0. Because the box 1 would be XX, box 2 would be XX, box 3 would be XY, box 4 would be XY, making a ratio 2 to 2. And that means 50% blue, 50% brown. The father of genetics would be Gregor Mendel. An example of phenotype is eye color and hair color. An example of genotype would be XX or XY. Your assignment for tomorrow is to write a story, including 4 of the terms that were on your list for today. The terms were heredity, Gregor Mendel, allele, genes, dominant, recessive, homozygous, heterozygous, genotype, and phenotype. If there are any questions, email me, and this assignment will be done on your own. Thank you.